Alright guys, welcome back. GM Light here. Today we're going to be talking about what I think is going to be the most successful horror movie of 2023 of the year. And this is kind of an interesting thing to talk about. We're about halfway through the year almost. We've had a few things be kind of unsuspected surprise hits. We've had movies like Megan, which brought in actually a whole lot of money. I imagined it probably would have done well, but I didn't expect it to be the hit that it really was. But I decided to start thinking about what's coming out, what could be the most successful thing, what's going to be the next big thing, what's going to be the big horror release of the year that when all is said and done, everyone walks away from the year, what is going to take home that crown? Now, it's tough to say because every once in a while, you have a movie like Barbarian where I didn't hear about it until like the month before it came out, and I thought, okay, that sounds interesting. Comes out, everyone's talking about it, it's a huge hit. I'm sure that we're gonna have a lot of surprises coming out the rest of this year, things that aren't on my radar, things that are gonna come out and take me by surprise, things that are gonna be a huge financial hit, I imagine. But for now, I kind of have to go franchise based, things that I've seen, things that I know are coming out, and things that I think are probably going to be a hit. And the first thing that's kind of on my radar is this new Boogeyman movie. I've been dredging through these really shitty ass Boogeyman movies from the early 2000s. They don't really have any relevance. This is based off a Stephen King short story, but it looks genuinely well made. It looks genuinely scary. It's PG-13. I wouldn't say it's a 4-quadrant movie, but I think it'll be accessible and scary in a way that will surprise most people. In my opinion, I think that it has the potential to be a big movie, maybe even the biggest horror movie of the year. PG-13 rating, we saw how it helped Megan. If this is a movie that can turn itself into an event film, get legs, get attention, get traction. I remember in 2017 going to see It. I've never had an experience like that with a horror movie in theaters before, and I've never had one since, I don't think. And I kind of see that in Boogeyman, especially too. It's a Stephen King adaptation. I think it has the potential to surprise. I could also be wrong. It could be a bad movie. It could be a flop, but the trailers look good. I think it looks interesting, and it just looks overall like it's at least a competently well-made movie that will have decent scares. I think at the very least it'll be a decent movie, and it definitely is going to do at least well. I don't think this is going to lose any money. I don't think it has a high budget to begin with, but still, when you got a well-made supernatural horror film, those tend to do well. They tend to play well, especially in a mass audience. So Boogeyman's probably going to be up there. Not my number one though. And then the next one's kind of running through these long-running franchises, things that are going on. So next up, I want to talk about Insidious 5. It seems like there's not that much buzz around this movie, and I'm a little bit surprised. I would have thought going back to the basics, going back to what worked about Insidious in the first place, taking the family from the first two, also moving the timeline forward finally, would have maybe sparked some interest, rejuvenated interest in this franchise. I also think that lipstick-faced demon is the scariest demon and creature to come out of the Insidious franchise. So the fact that the trailer garnered such a lukewarm response, I don't feel like people are really talking about it a whole lot, talking about it enough. I just think it's kind of weird. I didn't expect that at all. So I would have to imagine a lot of the box office success would have to do with word of mouth. If people enjoyed this movie and were talking about it, more people would go. But I could see this movie underperforming extremely, and that bums me out because I'm really excited for this film. I'm going to be reviewing all 4 Insidious movies next month leading up to it. But yeah, I just overall find it strange that no one seems that interested. No one seems as high on this upcoming Insidious movie as I definitely am. Maybe newer trailers, maybe more hype and marketing will kind of change my mind on this, but I could actually see this movie not doing too well. Next up is Saw X. I just made a video about Saw, talking about what I want them to do with this franchise, and this also seems like a franchise that people are kind of gassing out on. They're running out of steam. People aren't that interested in Saw anymore. That kind of bums me out because I'm a huge fan of this franchise. I love Saw. I've said this before. They can make 50 Saw movies. I will be there opening night every time, and I'll be happy to see it, and I'll probably most likely enjoy it unless it's a terrible film. Saw X feels very reactionary in light of Spiral and kind of the underperformance and the response to that. They want to go back to basics, go back to safety, which Tobin Bell is Jigsaw, even though he's 80. And now they're convoluting the timeline a little bit further. They're making it a prequel, doing everything they can to extend what they can with the story of Jigsaw. I was perfectly happy to see them move on from Jigsaw. I would have loved to see a sequel to Spiral and continue that dynamic between Chris Rock and the new Jigsaw, there was just interesting messaging and concepts there that they could have built on more if they made more movies and if Spiral was more of a success. But unfortunately, I don't think we're going to see that. But with Saw X, I'm just not sure how it's going to play. I'm not sure if it's going to garner that interest. Seems like a lot of people unfortunately checked out of this franchise a long time ago. It's been running a long time. The last 2 attempts at a rebooted series, they didn't end up taking off or working out, or nothing really came of it. And as a fan, that's kind of frustrating because it's hard for me to get attached or excited for these new movies when it feels like it's always a dead end. It feels like they're opening up a door just to close it. If they were to make a standalone Saw movie, in and of itself, it was a satisfying conclusion and I was happy with it. That would be different, but Jigsaw and Spiral, they end on cliffhangers. They end up on kind of sour notes that leave the door open for a sequel. Sequels that just never happened. Never will happen, most likely. With Saw X, I'm kind of interested to see if this is going to be a closing of the book on Tobin Bell's Jigsaw. I think its best shot is if it's a good movie, first of all, and it gets good word of mouth. That will heavily help it, but also if it markets itself as the legitimate actual finale to this saga. That would change things. Marketing the fact that this is Tobin Bell's last time being Jigsaw, which he's 80 years old. I can't imagine he wants to do it again. But this is a franchise that I just think is losing its steam. I'm not sure how well this movie is going to do. I think it could still potentially make money, especially if the budget's low enough, but I guess we'll see. I'd say its biggest threat is another movie I'm going to talk about later that happens to release on the same day. You guys know what I'm talking about. I'll get to it later though, because first I got one more sequel that I want to talk about, and that's The Nun 2. I fucking hate The Nun. I think The Nun is just the most bottom of the barrel, lazy garbage that studio has put out. Something that I think has been unfortunate about the Conjuring franchise is that it's lowered the standards of studios. It's turned a lot of horror movies into just spook house, scary jump fests. Nothing good, nothing deep, nothing layered. Pretty much anyone who says that horror movies are shit, The Nun is what I imagine is the reason why they say that. It's just such a low effort movie. It's so lazy, it's bland, it's boring, and just worst of all, it's just fucking forgettable. I don't remember nearly anything about that first Nun movie. I remember not enjoying it. I remember it being a drag to get through, and the idea of a sequel just doesn't interest me at all. But with that, I think The Nun 2 is definitely, of these 3 sequels that I've discussed, going to be the most financially profitable. I think it'll be the most successful. I think it'll draw the most attention, hype. They had a really good marketing campaign behind that first Nun movie. I can't imagine that they drop the ball on that again. Conjuring movies make a hell of a lot of money. And although I think the popularity with this franchise is starting to wane a little bit, there's gas in the tank. Movies like Annabelle, movies like The Nun, they make a shit ton of money, and people will go and see them every time. I'll probably go and review it for the channel, but other than that, I don't really have any interest. But I can imagine though, it's going to make a lot of money. I think it's going to do incredibly well. The Nun 1 made a hell of a lot of money. Might actually even be the most profitable Conjuring movie. Last time I checked, it's been a while. I could be wrong, but that's at least what I think. And I'm not surprised at all that they did choose to do a sequel to this, but my thing that I hope is that they try and put time into it. They actually make it a quality movie. I know a lot of people like Annabelle 2. I'm not the biggest fan of Annabelle 2. I think I need to maybe give it another rewatch. But just an approach with better writing, better scares, an inkling of effort will make it go a long way. But I think regardless of the quality, Nun 2 is probably going to wipe the floor with Saw X and Insidious, The Red Door, even though it's the one that I have the least amount of hype for. But getting into what I think is probably going to be pretty easily the most profitable, successful horror movie of the year. You guys knew it was going to be Five Nights at Freddy's, come on. So I think that there's a few things maybe working against it having as honest and clear-cut of a financial win as we're going to be thinking. It comes out the same day as Saw X, and I think it's going to wipe the floor with Saw X. I don't think Saw X stands a chance against it. Five Nights at Freddy's is a bigger brand. It's newer. It's been anticipated for years. This movie's been hyped up for years. It's going to be PG-13, so anyone can go see it. But basically what I think is going to make it chip away at its box office, it's going to be Saw X, even if it still just beats the living shit out of Saw X. Saw X is a financial flop. Saw X is still going to be chipping away, even if it's ever so slightly. movie at the box office. It's still a competitor. It's a horror movie that's released on the same day, competing against it. If I really had to guess, I think that Saw X is probably going to move realistically, but let's assuming it doesn't. That does chip away at Five Nights at Freddy's box office regardless. If, even 5 to 10% of people choose Saw X over Five Nights at Freddy's, that's not negligible. And you also have to consider the Peacock day and date release model. It's ridiculous. I don't know why they still do it. Halloween Kills and Halloween Ends definitely could have made way more money if they decided to just release in theaters. But Blumhouse still kind of attached to this model, and I don't really get it, but that definitely will chip away at the box office. Especially too, I'm thinking in my head, I want to go and get the theatrical experience for it, but you think about the money that it costs, you think about the time that it costs. It's a PG-13 horror movie. I'm nervous about a really awful audience being in attendance. I'm thinking about what if I want to stay home and drink and watch it. It's enticing to want to just stay home and watch something for free instead of making all this effort to go out and spend my money and have a bad experience. Five Nights at Freddy's deserves the theatrical experience, but it's enticing, and I think that a lot of other movies have been tanked by the day and date release. I'd say Suicide Squad from 2021 is probably the biggest example. The movie, by all accounts, it's a financial loss. In terms of box office, they lost money on that movie. HBO Max subscription wise, it's one of the most watched and successful HBO Max movies or originals or whatever you want to call it. But still, day and date release is undoubtedly harmful for a movie like this. Even with that though, I think it's going to be very successful. If I really had to guess, I can imagine at least $200 million from this movie. That's even, I'd say, probably being conservative. Evil Dead Rise made over $100 million. That was extremely successful, unexpectedly successful to that degree. I knew it would probably be good. It had a lot of good word of mouth, and it's a movie that people seemed excited to see, but I didn't expect it to be as big of a hit as it was. Who knows, maybe even Evil Dead Rise could end up being the most successful horror movie of the year. We'll have to see how the rest of the year goes, but right now, I have a gun to my head. I have to decide what I think is going to end up being the most successful of the year. I'd say Five Nights at Freddy's a lock. And even if this is kind of an irrelevant fact, look at the Super Mario Bros. Movie. Video game movie, made $1 billion. Five Nights at Freddy's, long anticipated, pretty accessible PG-13 horror movie based on an extremely popular video game. I don't think it's $1 billion movie, but it's definitely a $100 million movie. That's just what I think. I'd love to hear what you guys have to say in the comments. Let me know what you guys think. What do you think is going to be the most successful horror movie of the year? Let me know. Have a good one.